Hey guys, I know you're expecting the GeForce GTX 1080 review coverage any day now, but in the meantime, I've taken a quick look at the new Doom game, in particular how it performs on PC using the current generation GPUs. Midway through last month, there was an open beta weekend for Doom, and I did take a quick look at the game back then, but didn't provide a benchmark video. The reason for this was simple. At the time, the game was capped at 60 FPS and also had limited tunable quality settings. Thankfully, now that the game has been officially released, those two issues have been sorted and we can now smash Demon Skulls at high frame rates with ultra quality settings. Speaking of which, any of my younger viewers might want to avoid this video, as Doom is a very violent game and I'll be showing some of the gorier scenes in the game, such as those animated glory kill clips. The Doom reboot has been built on the new ID Tech 6 game engine, which is quite different to pretty much every other modern gaming engine in the sense that it utilizes OpenGL, while Vulkan API support will be patched in at a later date. For those of you unaware, Vulkan is the successor to OpenGL, offering an open source alternative to Microsoft's proprietary DirectX API. Vulkan is cross-platform, meaning it isn't limited to Windows and other Microsoft platforms like DirectX is, and it will be supported by Google's Android and Valve's SteamOS. Doom's a single and multiplayer game, but I'll be testing the single player portion, as it really isn't possible to accurately benchmark the multiplayer modes. This isn't really an issue anyway, as from GPU performance perspective, the results should be much the same, and more to the point, the performance margins between the various AMD and Nvidia graphics cards will certainly be the same. As usual, I'll be testing using the high-end in-game quality settings at the three most commonly gamed resolutions, being 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. This meant enabling the Ultra preset while manually turning the shadow quality and virtual texturing page size options to the Nightmare setting. Performance-wise, there are only a few frames difference between running these two graphical settings on Ultra and Nightmare for those wondering. Before we jump into the results, let's watch the rest of the benchmark pass. ID Software appear to have worked more closely with Nvidia on this title, and it's been used to show off the new Nvidia 1080 at press events of late. The following results tell the same story. At 1080p, the GTX 960 was 6% faster than the R9 380. Not a huge margin, but we're more used to seeing the 380 on top of that battle. The big shock here is how poorly the 390X and 390 compared to the GTX 970. Granted, the Radeon graphics cards do struggle at 1080p due to the driver overhead, but a 27% margin favouring the 970 over the 390X is massive. The Fury X can also be seen battling the GTX 980, making it 17% slower than the GTX 980 Ti. So some out of place results here from the AMD GPUs for sure. Jumping to 1440p, all graphics cards tested were able to deliver playable performance, though the input lag when using the GTX 960 and R9 380 was quite severe. The 390 and 390X provided playable performance, but again it was the GTX 970 that provided the perfect balance of price versus performance. Now at 4K, we find that gamers will ideally want more than one GPU, as the GTX 980 Ti and Titan X did drop down to 41 FPS on occasion. The game was still playable, but at 40 FPS it does feel noticeably different to 60 FPS, as most first-person shooters do. 4K is where the next generation GPUs are going to shine, and I expect that tomorrow's launch of the GTX 1080 will see some very impressive results. Those of you rocking AMD hardware will no doubt be a bit disappointed with these results, which were recorded using the latest Crimson 16.5.2 drivers, apparently designed to support Doom. These results seem to imply that it's an Nvidia supported title, although I haven't seen anything official, but that would explain why it runs so poorly on AMD hardware. Some believe though that there could be something more sinister going on here, and there's certainly some strong evidence of that. Using a Radeon graphics card forces the game to run an older version of OpenGL version 4.3. Nvidia graphics cards, on the other hand, use the more up-to-date OpenGL 4.5. The lead renderer programmer at ID Software said this was a mistake that can be seen when using the ultra quality settings. However, I found that the game would load OpenGL 4.3 on AMD hardware regardless of quality settings, even with the game's low quality preset. Hopefully, this is a genuine mistake, but it does seem very shady to say the least. What I find interesting is that those who benchmarked Doom during the alpha stage showed very strong performance on AMD hardware. Then the open beta dropped and Nvidia managed to just take the lead. Now we have the official release and AMD is almost nowhere to be seen in terms of performance. OpenGL 4.3 was released in August of 2012, while version 4.5 came exactly 2 years later, and with it came a number of improvements in efficiency that would account for the performance discrepancies we've seen here. So with AMD's performance woes appearing to be entirely in the hands of ID Software, I'm hoping to see a game update in the very near future. The good news for Radeon owners is that despite underperforming, the 390 and 390X still provided a very smooth, playable experience at 1440p with all the eye candy turned up. There were no graphical glitches or crashes of any kind, rather we do get a pretty satisfying gaming experience. Another interesting footnote worth mentioning is that Crossfire and SLI don't work in this game, and I'm not sure if support will be patched in. Also, for the single player portion of the game, the CPU really isn't that important, and even lowly dual cores such as the Pentium G4400 deliver excellent performance. Finally, you guys might want to stay tuned because tomorrow night I'll be getting busy with this little lady. And you'll be getting the explicit, uncut Director's Edition. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Cannot be allowed to leave this place. He will ruin everything.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last